Hi everyone, in this video I'm continuing the discussion about Jane Eyre and actually the spiritual and karmic choices of the characters in Jane Eyre, which was unfolding in the story as well, which is why it is an important classic to understand if you want to understand journey of ascension and karmic choices and journey about twin flame love. If you want to understand it deeply, you can understand it from different characters of this book and the way the book was written. So in my previous video, I wasn't sure whether divorce was allowed in England at the time when Jane Eyre was written, and it turned out when I googled it up and I hope this is the real information that I found online, but it told me that in 1857 is the first year when divorce related laws were changed in England. So until 1857, divorce was not that common or allowed greatly. And even after 1857, when divorce was allowed, men had a easier time seeking divorce than women. And the second thing that was interesting to me was 1857 is also the year when Jane Eyre got published first. So, which means that the narrative she has put in her story are elements of real people going through these challenges during the 1800s or in the past in the 1700s, which the story that she has written could have been a story of a character who had existed in 1700s England, and part of the story could have been taken from their experience. Part of the story could have been taken from someone who was existing in the 1800s. People who were possibly related to the Ayers could have been their family. Part of it could have been a little bit of their own personal experiences of life, all of which, when an author usually writes a fictional novel, has some elements of real life experiences present in that novel, as well as experiences of other people they know, that also gets presented in a manner which can mimic in the future or in the present the lives of certain real life people with those similar level challenges that the main characters or all the characters of Jane Eyre were experiencing in their life. Now let's look at the karmic choice related thing that happened in Jane Eyre, and a very straightforward karma was unfolding in the Jane Eyre story. And this was also because it is also a story related to patriarchy and what happens to women when patriarchy doesn't support them or help them in a way they could help, is also a part of the narrative of Jane Eyre. So in Jane Eyre, the story where when her aunt Mrs. Reed is very cruel towards her, one reason for her aunt also being cruel towards her is because now she already has two daughters and an additional daughter is getting added to her plate. And marrying off daughters, if you've read Jane Austen's novel, where Jane Austen has made some fun about it related to getting daughters married off, when she examined it in Pride and Prejudice. But that was something, again, a major concern for many families, of where a lot of girls were there in the family. Getting them married off has been a challenge for majority of humanity, not just in England but in globally also. People can start considering daughters as a burden, and when they have more daughters in the family, they start considering that even more of a social and socioeconomic burden, which then leads to the resentment related to what will happen to the daughter after if they don't get married, or after they get married, how much do we have to support them. All of these challenges start happening. But these are also the part of a karmic life journey only you are meant to navigate on earth, that when you have been given a sibling or a daughter in your family who is a female, the male sibling's role is to understand how much it should be the scope of their responsibility towards the family that they were born in. If you understand that scope of responsibility and take that scope of responsibility in the right balanced manner, you're doing your job as a patriarchal person. But when you don't understand it, that is when you fail to do your job as a patriarchal person, or you then reap the karma also of the job that you didn't do. For example, when when her parents died, after her parents died, she had actually, if you see the whole story, she had three other patriarchal figures who could have supported her. It's just that all three figures didn't know about the conditions related to her life. So the first patriarchal figure who did understand about the conditions related to her life was her uncle Reed. And as soon as he understood that, my sister's daughter is orphaned, and he had the patriarchal responsibility, he was a patriarchally responsible human, and he loved his sister. So if he hadn't loved his sister, he wouldn't have kept in touch with his sister. But because he did love his sister, he was keeping in touch with her. Because he did love his sister, he was immediately able to understand when his sister's daughter has now become an orphan. And as soon as he understood that, he took the orphan child under his care. So he was a very responsible patriarch. But the place where he was irresponsible is the part where he decided to marry someone. He possibly married his wife out of looks or out of her property, because looks and property were the two main characteristics sought by people of higher socioeconomic status, even middle class to higher socioeconomic status people, usually in general, which is a trend. It is not a trend that is a ancient trend. It is a trend that has been followed by humanity for a long time. But middle class socioeconomic status people or upper middle class people usually tend to marry people with either more money than them, or good looks than them, or some social advantages than them. That is what most people seek to get from their marital alliances. And very rarely, if you are an unawakened soul, or if you get too much into the societal norms of the patterns established by your society, people tend to make these kind of choices, not realizing the deeper repercussions of those choices. So while John Reed was a generous person, if he didn't marry a generous wife, he has potential to attract three types of wives because of his generosity. Either he will attract the wife who will be completely selfish and pretend to be generous, or he will attract a wife who will be completely selfish and not pretend any generosity, or but might have advantages which will make him think that he might be generous in the future. And or he could marry someone who will be equally generous than him, but they may not be of the equal social status as him, or even if they are at a equal social status, they may not have an economic advantage. So if his marriage was arranged by his family, he didn't have a say in who he is marrying, or even if he had a say in who he is marrying, he could have been trapped by beauty and other things rather than scrutinizing deeply what happens. And all of us, when we are unconscious souls, we don't do this deep scrutiny. The deep scrutiny that Edward Rochester also did about Jane Eyre in the book, that scrutiny he was doing about Jane Eyre and other women interested in him, after he had failed only in not having good marriages or good relationships in the past, then only he started doing the deep scrutiny. And many of us are like that, unawakened souls. And if in one particular lifetime we didn't do that deep scrutiny, now this John Reed's soul, in next lifetime when he is born again, he will do a deeper scrutiny of women that he couldn't do in his lifetime as John Reed, because there was a repercussion for him not doing a deeper scrutiny of who is marrying. So while he was a generous soul, his wife was not generous, or she was only generous to patriarchy. She was not generous to her daughters as well as the orphan child in her care. And because she didn't want to take care of Jane, God also knows what is the limitation of every human being that is existing on earth at any point of time on earth. And understand Jane Eyre's story is exactly how it unfolds for many humans and orphans or orphan children like Jane. Something very similar does unfold for many children like that, like her, where God will know that if you are under the care of someone who is crueler, one way in which God was setting up to for her to now leave this cruel sitting was what? When John Reed, her cousin, was his name was John Reed. I looked it up. So her cousin brother John Reed was very cruel towards her, and she fell sick at that time. Why did she fall sick so severely? She fell sick because she was not being caretaken. She fell sick because she was being abused. She fell sick because no one was there to give her the motherly caretaking that she needed when she fell sick. So when the doctor came to treat her, the doctor understood this. That's why only the doctor suggested for her to get now shifted into a boarding school instead, where again, where he knows that poor conditions does exist in those places also. but he understood that this child is not being deeply caretaken. That's why only he suggested a school where at least education would be provided to the child, some other female company would be there who would be nicer to the child, and all of these reasons were the reasons why they suggested her to be taken away. But in the background, what else was happening? In the background, what else was unfolding was that Jane had two other uncles. Now, the other uncle, the Rivers family's uncle, possibly had died, because if you look at the Rivers family, when Jane finally meets her cousins, who turned out to be her cousins, that St. John and Mary and Diana's father was also Jane Eyre's mother's brother. But that father had likely passed away in the past. And because he had passed away and they were themselves going through possibly financial related challenges, and because of which that family couldn't concentrate to keep in touch with Jane Eyre when Jane Eyre's mother died. And that's why they didn't have any deeper understanding of what was going on with Jane Eyre's life. But if God had meant for Jane to meet the Rivers family as well. So if Mrs. Reed had not been that selfish, she would have kept in touch even not only with Jane Eyre's family, but she would have kept in touch even with Rivers family. And if she had kept in touch with Rivers family, because the Rivers family, even if they had financial challenges, they were a more generous family, and because of which only when Jane finally dropped in front of their home and fainted, they took care of even a stranger because they had that generosity of soul. So if they had actually kept in touch with if Mrs. Reed had kept in touch with them, she wouldn't have had to thrust away Jane into a boarding school also. She could have very easily have given away Jane to the Rivers family as well. But because she is karmically a selfish human being, she doesn't know how to maintain family contacts, and because she's selfish, she doesn't know how to maintain family contacts. She never used the potential of the family that was already accessible to her, that if she doesn't want the responsibility, she can give the responsibility to someone else. But she instead and when people are also a little bit not just selfish, but they are also very lazy people do this. Lazy meaning they are not lazy, it's not that she doesn't do any work, she does do work, but lazy in building social connections, or lazy in understanding that humanity exists, or humanity succeeds together and jointly when you are collaboratively working with everyone in your life, with many people connected to you, with the people God has already connected you with, because there's always a higher purpose to the people you are connected with. And Jane Eyre could have easily had an alternative to go and live with the Rivers family, and that choice would have happened only if the Rivers family knew that Mrs. Reed doesn't want to take care of Jane Eyre anymore. Then only that path would have unfolded with the Rivers family. And in the meantime, see, God has made 3 plans for Jane now. The 3 plans that God had, 3 backup plans were there for Jane. First, the doctor saw that she's been ill-treated. So the doctor set up a chain of events and suggestions so that Jane gets into Lowood School. But if Lowood School was not going to be a possibility, then also there was Rivers family that was a possibility as well. And there was John Eyre, who was the uncle from her father's side, who was also looking for her, because once he found he was living outside of England. So for him to get the information that his niece is orphaned took a while. And then maybe if he was a single person, for him to decide whether he should adopt that niece or let her go might have taken a while. And he found out that the niece was living with the aunt and another uncle, so that's why he assumed that maybe the niece is going to have a good life because they are a married couple. So he could have not taken any initiative to adopt the child, because he saw that at least the child will have mother and father like influence from the uncle and aunt. That's why he didn't do anything. But the moment he found out, he was possibly keeping tabs on her, and when he found out that the child is now going to be going to the boarding school, at that time only, I think during that time when she was living in the boarding school, he wanted to possibly give her some money to secure her future. And if Mrs. Reed had now allowed John Eyre to connect with Jane, Jane's future would have changed drastically during her time in Lowood School as well. And which is also potentially, if anything like this unfolds in a real human being's life, at that time these things will be unfolding almost simultaneously at the time at which you have a need. So when her friend Helen Burns died in childhood, at that time only possibly her uncle came to know about her misery and wanted to give money to her. But because her uncle didn't have her connections at Lowood School, he couldn't connect to her. And then if her uncle had his own financial obligations and other things tying him up, he couldn't connect to her. But because Jane was destined to meet the Rivers, Jane was also destined to get the money from the uncle. Both of which, even though they were delayed, they unfolded in a thing called divine timing of those unfoldings. Because now, after she meets the Rivers, she had a karmic journey of life, being that the Rivers were her cousins. That technically, because she has all these family, there was a destined path of hers that was meant to unfold, where for a few years she was meant to interact with the Rivers. Now when that few years or few months she was meant to interact with them, and if she had interacted with them as children, there would have been a different set of experiences that would have unfolded for them as children. And if they had interacted with her when she was in her 20s, a different set of experiences unfolded when they were in their 20s, right? So that experience was meant to happen, and it was also meant to happen because Jane was also supposed to learn that there are generous souls also in the world. That's why she had to meet the Rivers, that people are not that selfish, people can be very generous to strangers also. And because she had the gratitude now in her heart for the generosity they had shown her, the kindness they had shown her, the loving caretaking they showed her, the caretaking that no one else had shown her when she was orphaned. And because when the moment she was orphaned, at that point of time also, see, and this is the karma only that was unfolding. Like at that time, if Mrs. Reed hadn't found out that Mr. Reed hadn't found out Jane was orphaned, and Mr. Rivers was still alive and he had found out, he would have taken care of her in the same way that his daughters and son did to Jane. So what he has taught his children only got passed on to Jane. So that's why only this is how the karma of family life unfolds, that whatever he has taught his children finally brought it into the relationship with Jane without even knowing that Jane was their cousin. But Jane understood the higher implication of it. So and it's St. John only, if St. John hadn't, like how Mrs. Reed now prevented Jane from connecting to John Eyre's family to get the inheritance that was in her name, St. John could have done that too. He could have stopped her from getting that inheritance as well. But because he wasn't the same personality now, like not as selfish in this lifetime, because he was not selfish, because he was wanting to be a good soul in this life, he did connect Jane to Mr. John Eyre. And as a result of that gratitude only, that St. John was responsible for her connecting to her uncle, the fact that St. John and Dinah and Martha had helped her in her recovery, given her a shelter when she was completely penniless, all of these only meant that she karmically, that's why, distributed the money that she got, she distributed with her cousins. Because this is what family also does. When you have family, when you are in you love your family deeply, when you understand the deep needs of your family. And why did she distribute it equally? She realized that she is a very simple girl. So being a simple girl, she realized, I don't need this much money. She's not greedy, she doesn't need that much money. That's why she did it. She also did it because they were generous to her. She also did it because she understood, like her sisters, the cousin sisters, the Rivers, they both were governesses. They both also didn't have a stable life. They also, and she has been a governess herself, so she knows what a life governesses have. She's been a teacher, she knows what lives teachers have. And she also was a single woman, so she knows what life single woman has. She has also learned from the experiences of her other two cousins, Eliza and Georgiana. So from there also she had learned how lack of money had caused them to make choices in their life that they may not have made if they did have some fair share monetary access from the Reed estate. But because those two sisters didn't get fair share, because John Reed, their brother, was not a fair guy, they couldn't have access to some money that would have changed their life's narrative if they had had some fair access to their father's property. So that's why only even, and John Eyre is not actually related to the Rivers at all except via the marital connection. But despite that, because she understood the plight of her siblings, she wanted to share the money with her female siblings. And she also wanted to share the money with St. John because she knew that it would help him in his missionary work to have additional finances accessible to him when he is doing the missionary work. So that's why also she gave the money. And there's another aspect which people may or may not think might be tied or not tied. There is no greater hint in the storyline only of this tie-up actually being true. But St. John was, in Jane Eyre's case, Jane Eyre's false twin, like Bertha Mason was Mr. Rochester's false twin. And Bertha Mason's property was used by Rochester family, right? So Rochester went around traipsing in Paris or dating other people, and all these luxuries that he got access to in his life, those luxuries were bought by the dowry money that Bertha Mason's family had paid. Now, whether she had just paid, I don't know the details of Mr. Rochester's financial thing was, I don't think it was discussed. But definitely, directly or indirectly, Bertha Mason's related marriage was responsible for giving Mr. Rochester some financial access. Now, those based on the way the story unfolds, there are three ways in which the money could have played a role in Mr. Rochester's life. The first way it could have played a role is Mr. Rochester's family could have been really poor and had some financial debts, and the Masons could have paid off the debt for the family and might have paid for his education. And because this was a very common thing rich people did when they are buying someone or paying for someone to marry their daughter, some rich families would do that. They would pay for the education of the son-in-law, future son-in-law. They would pay off the debts of the family. So when they do that, they could have done that itself, where he got a lot of education, and from his education he generated income. But his education wouldn't have happened if Bertha Mason's family hadn't educated him. That could have been just the bare minimum way in which his family was helped. That would have been just the bare minimum help, like paying off their debt, paying his education, where his future was all bright and shiny because of Bertha Mason's family's financial contribution. Second way in which they could have done it, not only just this is the first step in which they could have helped, but the second step in which they could have helped is they could have assigned a lot of their property to Edward Rochester's name as a dowry related thing. And if they had given it off as a dowry, like knowing that our daughter is going to be married to him, and at that time most properties were owned by men, so they would have given a fair share of their estate to him to run that estate. So now he is now financially completely, not only his past debt was paid or his education was paid, but his future was also settled in his name via the property they had given him. And a third way in which they could have continued, enabling him to continue taking care of Bertha was by Bertha's brother when he came to meet Heathcliff and Bertha in Thornfield. The reason why he came is, and he comes every few years to meet them, there's a high likelihood that his family didn't want to take care of her mental illness. They just wanted to hide her mental illness, and in order to hide her mental illness, they are paying off Mr. Rochester possibly a lot of money to upkeep her. They are the ones who are paying the money for her upkeep, and they don't want any legal responsibilities or social responsibilities, so he just comes to visit once in a while. And all of this is the reason why Bertha is so resentful towards her brother and she attacks her brother, because whatever they have done behind her, even if she doesn't know all the details of what had happened to her, like how she's been traded by these people, all of it also can build a very karmic resentment in her soul for being rejected at such a deep level by her own family. that by itself could lead her to be so aggressive towards these men, because they're just using her as a tool for exchanging money, tool for not taking responsibility that they should take as family, tool for none of them actually deeply caring for her at a humane level. She was not humanely cared for. So anyone who is not humanely cared for by their family only ends up becoming an inhumane person like Bertha Mason. Inhumanity doesn't exist out of nowhere. It exists only when you have been treated inhumanely at multiple levels. And also there is also another element which can lead her to attack her brother, and she even though she had some jealousy towards Rochester and she would attack Rochester as well, she was not as aggressive towards Rochester. And that difference of why she's not that aggressive towards Rochester is also something people need to understand. Why she's so aggressive towards her own brother. That thing can also happen in families where when people have sexually abused their women. So if sexually Mason had sexually done something to her, that could lead her to also hold resentment over her brother. If not Mason did something directly to her, but he enabled someone to sexually abuse her, that could also lead her to have this resentment. There are also people who have really bad company. So he could have had really bad company who came in the home because of him being friends with them, and those men could have attacked Bertha and raped her, which could have led to her mental decline, emotional decline, and cause her to become the woman she became. This could have been something that could have happened to Bertha. And again, when I'm talking about Jane Eyre, understand that these speculation parts of the story that I am talking about, which is not directly mentioned in the story, these could be another person who's having a very parallel, similar life experience like Jane Eyre or Mr. Rochester or Mr. Mason or a Bertha like characters present in their life. They have to understand that not everything is cut and dry. There are gray zones of life, and these are the things that impact the gray zones. And these are all the places where the Mason family has attracted their bad karma. Mason family was very rich. So being very rich, if the child was mentally disturbed as a child in childhood days only, in the first 10-20 years of someone's life, you can see whether they are mentally disturbed in that phase. At that time, if they already knew that the child is mentally disturbed, what having good money they should have done? They should have taken the steps to ensure that how to work with that mental illness, how to take care of a disability within family. Because while people don't look at mental illness like this, mental illness is as much of a dysfunctionality and disruption of life as physical illness is a disruptor of life. So when someone is physically disabled, many humans can very evidently understand physical disability, or they can understand the mental disability that is of the highest grade, where absolute functional disability is there. So if these two types of disability people understand very easily, those who are physically not immobile, not able to move because they don't have a limb, or because they went to a war and their limb is gone, and that's why they have functional disability. So when someone has a very functional and obvious disability like that, if you have some family member like that, like if Bertha Mason, instead of having a mental illness, had a physical illness, what would the Mason family have done? Because she has now a physical illness, they would have hired an assistant to take care of her. They would have done, if at that time wooden legs were available, they would give her a artificial limb to wear. If wooden limbs are not accessible for her to wear based on her condition, whatever disability she had, people, if you love for your family, you have love for your family, if you have the intention to take care of your family, you will do all sorts of things necessary to make the physical life comfortable for a person who is physically challenged. And you're not going to expect that physically challenged person to do normal functions like other normal human beings are doing. So you're not going to expect that a physically challenged sister is going to likely get married. You're not going to expect that if she gets married, well and good. But if she doesn't get married, you know that 90% likelihood is she's not going to get married. She's going to be dependent on you. So you will take steps to ensure her dependency on you and ensure a comfortable life for her, because she is that level physically challenged. If she was mentally challenged in such a way, like people with cerebral palsy and certain mental illnesses, they don't have physical capacity to do like motor neuron functional work. So they don't know how to eat properly, they don't know how to even hold things properly, their functional disability is there, plus mental illness is also there. Two things are going on with them. So it's a brain function problem as well as nervous system problem related to functional challenges as well. So while they could have a very physically fit looking body, then also they will have difficulty eating, they could have difficulty going to the bathroom, they could have difficulty doing normal speech patterns are not there for them. So at that time also, because it's a very evident and very observable physical and mental health challenge, that is a physical plus mental health challenge going on with someone, and also very disabling and very functionally disabling thing for that person. So that person being born, nothing can be done for that person except whoever is responsible for caretaking that person has to have now, and in that person's case no marriage is also possible, so lifelong you have to take care of that sibling. So if you have a sibling like that and you know that the sibling is at this stage, functional disability, mental health disability, you can't even have normal conversations with them, because someone who's just physically disabled, you can still have conversations with them, you can still think with them, you can still do some other functional activities with them. If someone's legs are disabled, their hands can do something. If someone's hand is disabled, their legs can do something. They can go for walks with family, walks and talks with family. So you still contribute something to the family life. But when you are both mentally and physically disabled, you're not contributing anything to the family life except what? You're contributing to the karma of the family life. How are you contributing to the karma of the family life? The dedication with which people actually serve you, help you, aid you, provide comfort to you, the love with which they are doing these things, the hatred with which they are doing these things, the neutrality with which they are doing these things, all of these are each family member's karma. So there could be 5 family members, like in the Mason family there could have been father, mother, Bertha Mason, Bertha Mason's brother, and let's say a servant who was taking care of and assuming that at that point of time this is a Bertha Mason's version where Bertha Mason is both physically and mentally disabled. At that time, if in a past life Bertha Mason was like that, that Bertha Mason who has physical and mental health illness, at that time when she needs to be caretaken, her father could have been providing the finances, brother could have been providing her some physical assistance and support while going to the bathroom when she needs to go to the bathroom, and she's been a taller woman, can't just be taken by just the women caretaker to the bathroom. So 2 people have to take her, one caretaker and a man has to take her to the bathroom. That could be something that needed to be done. So the brother could have learned that. The mother was providing good clean food to her, and like that different people were doing different things and the intentions of different people were different. Now if they were karmically at a higher vibrational intentional level, they would all be doing their best, and they could have bad days when they could resent doing this consistently for someone, but most of the time if they are at a high vibrating frequency, they will just do it with joy. They will do it that this is part of my life experience that I have come to experience on earth, and I have to take this responsibility of doing this. Especially if you are a very rich family, you have luxuries, access to luxuries, you have access to people you can hire to take care of this person, you have access to people who can come and do some physiotherapy to ensure that this person has some functional ability, a little bit better functional ability than what they have if they no physiotherapist is there, or if whatever it is, depending on your socioeconomic status and socioeconomic influence, you will have some karma associated with that socioeconomic status and socioeconomic influence. So if you are just a rich estate owner, out of the estate people that you govern, you could find people to take care of your sister in a good way, and she doesn't need just one caretaker. Like what happened to Bertha was relegated at the top of the house in a loft like place where she is imprisoned like a animal, like a wild animal. She has been imprisoned there, she's been very inhumanely treated by everyone in her life. So she whatever was given to her only will show up for her. And if this was given to her for 20-30 years of her life, or since childhood days this was happening to her, or after marriage this started happening to her, it was possibly happening to her since childhood days. That's why only she is so resentful for the Masons. And Masons only likely taught Thornfield, not Thornfield, Mason only possibly taught Edward Rochester how to take care of Bertha. Just they only might have suggested that Grace Poole was taking care of her in her home. You pay Grace Poole, or we will continue paying Grace Poole, but you have to take the responsibility. Whatever it is, something like that must have happened, which is the reason why Mason is. She attacks Mason so wildly and so bestially, because he has just shrugged away all karmic responsibility of her, even though he was primarily given her responsibility as her brother. That was his karmic responsibility, that as her brother, if he is saddled with a mentally ill sister, he has come with that karma to ensure that comfortable life should exist for that sister. If he brings that comfort to her, he gets comfort also, and some blessings also. How he would get it, that depends on God's plan for that person. But he didn't get it because he was a selfish brother. He was just wanting to do the bare minimum, so he just paid money to do whatever needed to be done, without seeing that just money. When you're rich, it is not simply about using money. It is about using money effectively, compassionately, in a right manner. All of these are karmic life lessons you have to learn being a rich person, and being a rich person of a responsible status, where you are a estate owner and are governing the lives of many people dependent on you. So that's why only in rich families you will see, or many a times even poor families have disabled people in their families, but their disability related karmic experiences of a poor family is very different from a disability related karmic experience of a middle class family, is very different from a disability related karmic experiences of a very rich family. And this very rich family, all they thought of doing was, we don't want to take the responsibility, so the moment she is marriageable age, or if she even manages to charm one man, we are going to just get her married to that man. And there could have been some flirting, past life karma related thing, or whatever was there, where some attraction was present, or they could see that Bertha is attracted to him, so let's get her married. And they saw that his family is poor or in some destitute like condition. They just used and basically manipulated the Rochester family possibly to marry her. And that's why only Edward was very resentful. He had been manipulated. First he was manipulated by the Mason family, then he was manipulated by in Paris by Celine Varens. So he got manipulated twice by women. That's why he was testing Blanche Ingram and Jane Eyre both, when he did all the things in Thornfield to test them, to see who is a better quality woman, who is a more sincere woman, and all that. He was testing their personality at that time, because he had been duped so badly in the past. But because he didn't understand that putting Bertha Mason away like an animal in the loft of the home was a very cruel act, he could have, like how he had brought a governess into Adele's life, a caring governess into Adele's life. Like that, after seeing Jane, he could have decided also to bring a caring caretaker. Like Grace Poole is needed when she is in her maddest form. So she's not always mad, and she's not always, fuming and attacking people. But some days she's fuming and attacking, some days she's calm. So, and she was highly medicated also possibly. So the days the medication is working for her, she's calm. The days the medication doesn't work, she's attacking, or she's a very clever person also. And she's a high IQ holding person as well. So she has high IQ, so she knows how to dupe Grace Poole and leave the room. And that's how only she goes and burns away Jane's veil. She goes and burns Mr. Rochester's bed one time. All of these things she's able to do because she is also very high IQ. So that was her problem. There was a curse, like this family who became rich, they became rich possibly, they all have possibly high IQ, the Masons. So they had a high IQ and they knew human nature, they knew how to manipulate human nature, and that's why after manipulating human nature, they gained a lot of properties. But despite them gaining a lot of properties after manipulating, it doesn't matter what tools you use to gain the property. If there is some future benefit to the property you have, God may allow you to get the riches. But there is always a time when the God will want to wake you up, and that's why a person like Bertha Mason was born to wake them up, that what you're doing, how you're manipulating people, the people they got manipulated with, they could have had put curse on the Mason family, or they could have decided that, you know, how we have suffered, you also should suffer. And that's why only someone high IQ and cruel, and also someone who was also their victim also, she was a victim of the Mason family as well, just like other victims of the family who were unrelated to them, but she was a related victim to them, and she was a way of actually them clearing this karma, that if people unrelated to you, you didn't understand their suffering, can you understand the suffering of a person related to you? Because when people manipulate, people also manipulation leads to something called reaction to abuse from people. Manipulation leads to, even if I don't know what exact harm you're doing to me, but at a higher level my soul knows you're harming me in some way, that causes naturally a natural lack of affinity for you, because you are not operating under the basic principles of life. The basic principles of life is, you have to if you have been brought together to have common lives with someone, because they are your family, because you married them, because they are your siblings, because it's a stranger you want to take care of, whatever is the reason for you to associate with some human who has been present to you by God. They could be a stranger coming, like how Jane came to the river's life. They could be a orphan coming, how she was presented to the Reeds, or they could be like Bertha, how she was presented to Mr. Rochester. So all of these people, or Bertha when she was born in a family which was doing a lot of cruelty to other people. So when cruel, and they were likely exploiting women only, that's why only a women child was born with this mental illness, because when you get manipulated and exploited by someone, these people were rich estate owners. So, and also Mr. Mason is a very selfish person. You can see only through his trajectory of steps he took in the story that he was a very selfish person. So because he was a selfish person, it's very likely that his parent was also a very selfish person. Because the parent was also a selfish person, they could have, you know, one or both parents could have been like that. One or both parents could have been, you know, using unfair means, got other people's property, and then they could have, you know, brought some misery in their lives, which led them to feel as trapped as Bertha was feeling in her life. And that's the karma she had come to clear for the family, that what was inflicted in the past by maybe a grandfather or a father or a uncle of that family to another woman, where another woman was made to feel trapped. And while that woman was not mentally ill, but she was also, many people do this also when manipulators are present in a person's family, or too much manipulation of humans are going on by humans, those humans will make a very rational and physically sane and mentally sane person also. They can twist and manipulate the circumstance around some person's life to make them seem like they are mentally ill. So they could have done that. They could have, I have some friends whose husbands have done this to them. I know personally a couple of people who have faced this challenge, where even though they were mentally very sane, they were projected as mentally insane to the world by making them get abused so manipulatively consistently for so long, that as a result of psychological abuse going on in their life, emotional abuse going on in their life, or multiple levels of abuse going on in their life, that person, when they are crying or, you know, expressing natural response to the abuse, which is called response to abuse or reactive abuse, when they are showing that, at that time they will prove that this person is mentally ill or this person is the abuser. So like that, a manipulator can twist the narrative to make the abuse victim seem like the abuser. And if they had done like that to some women, which was definitely something they would have done, then only you get a daughter like Bertha born to you. That what cruelly you have done to other people, now you have chance to make amends for your family's karma, where your grandfather could have done to a woman, where he registered someone as mad when that person was not mad. he pushed someone towards madness deliberately by psychologically manipulating them, and then taking their property away or other things were responsible for doing that to someone. So if your grandfather has done that, you have a karma to clear. Now whether the family will clear it is based on Bertha's dad's karma, Bertha's brother's karma, Bertha's mother's karma. And none of them, all of them definitely failed to clear the karma. Because they failed to clear the karma, that's why only Bertha became this wild, animal-like, animalistic, resentful, because her higher purpose of clearing the karma didn't happen. She was given a very difficult task of clearing the karma by being mentally ill, but her mental illness escalated and progressed and became worse and worse over time, because the ways to clear the karma and to keep her at a moderate level of manageable mental illness would have happened when they had treated her like a human, when they had understood that manipulations are not a good thing, if they had not reeled in Rochester also into their family life. If they hadn't done that, if they had taken the responsibility that if my grandfather or my uncle had duped a woman and gained property from a woman by making her prove to be mad, and they repeated that with her, like they had a chance of not doing that same thing that they have done to another woman in the past to their own daughter by just he could have even taken property, like let's see Bertha's father and Mr. Mason, or a grandfather who did want to absorb their karma, had written that because he understood what grievous thing he might have done in the past to someone else, and after seeing Bertha he understood that, let's say the grandfather or a uncle woke up one day that I understand now what pain I caused someone else. So now I need to be responsible towards my granddaughter, or I need to be responsible towards my niece. So that person could have written a property where he had said that but she's mentally ill, so she can't take care of herself. So the property could have been written in name of Richard Mason, that you being her brother, you have to take care of her, and I'll give you this money to take care of her. And which is highly likely what was happening with Richard Mason. That's why I think his name is Richard Mason. He came, and that's why I kept every few years keeping in touch with the Rochesters and seeing how Bertha is doing. But he was doing a very bare minimum thing related to the reason why the grandfather had given the property to the grandson is because grandfather wanted that she should be caretaken in a humane manner. But the grandfather, after he passed away, before he passed away, maybe she was taken care of partly in some humane manner. But after he passed away, that humane manner caretaking didn't happen. And Bertha knows that. That's why only she resents Mason more, possibly. Like all of these things, these are all the possible reasons why she resents her brother so much. He either took away her money, or the money that was to be given for her caretaking was not used for her, or she was sexually abused by someone, or some other thing happened in her past that she knows her brother is responsible for. That's why only she attacks him. There's always, even in a madman's attack, there is some logic related to that. And the reason why she burnt away Thornfield is because if Thornfield was purchased now with the Masons' money, Thornfield is technically her place. And he could have, Edward Rochester, if he really wanted to clear his karma with now Bertha, like yes, he was reeled into this drama of the Mason family's life unknowingly, unwittingly, he was manipulated into doing it. But his being also reeled into their life could have some past life related karma clearing related purpose to it. And because it was past life related or karma clearing related purpose, or future life directed karma related purpose, he had to understand maybe how to deal with people who are mentally ill. In a future life he will have to deal with them. So here in this life, that's why he got a close quarter analysis of being married to someone that mentally ill, so that in a future life he can stay away from a woman like this. Or there is another karma clearing that he had to do, that even though he got education from them possibly, or the money to buy Thornfield and other luxuries, after he has settled well in life, maybe it was time for him to use that money now to caretake Bertha. What Mason couldn't do, Thornfield could have done. Like at Thornfield, Edward Rochester could have done by giving more supportive care, more healing related care to Bertha that he couldn't provide despite having access to a lot of money. But he and That's why, when the burning happens, he also becomes physically disabled and he becomes blind, because what he was blind to, there is a actual physical reason for it, blindness, to show him what was he blind to, the pain of Bertha. Secondly, the suffering that she felt because of being cheated by so many men and people not caretaking her. He went through that phase, right, when Jane was now separated from him and gone away, and there is no one else except two servants who were actually taking care of him in the cottage where Jane finally finds him later on. So the few years that Jane was away from him at that time, and the few years after, which after the burning down, he had a few years of life where he was leading this dependency filled life where two caretakers were caretaking him. So wouldn't he have understood what it means to not have love in your life? Those caretakers, they were just simply being paid to caretake him. They were some loyal past workers of his who had some human empathy. That's why they were caretaking him. But when Jane finds him, you can see that the caretakers don't interact with him. They don't socialize with him. They don't show the compassion that a disabled person also needs when the disabled person is being caretaken. So because all that thing was not accessible to him in his life, why do you think he kept crying for Jane, Jane, Jane? He says that Jane, Jane, Jane cry that he sent out in the world is because he finally understood, possibly that day when he shouted and called her to him. He did it because his soul finally understood all the things he did wrong to Jane, all the things he did wrong to Bertha, all the places he could have been better, because he had now begun to understand that and realize that, and he understood the value of true love. Like, if Jane was there, he knows that Jane wouldn't have left him bereft like this, lost like this, just sitting alone like this with his dog. That's why he called her, and she came also. As soon as he realized that, as soon as she heard him, she came to him. And when she came to him, she also realized what is going on in his life, and that's why she completely changed and shifted his life and gave him the personal experience of, when someone is disabled, what kind of love has to be given to that person who is disabled. And Jane couldn't have done that if Jane hadn't run away first. Jane couldn't have done that because before that, Jane also didn't have absolute unselfishness driven care from anyone before that. Many people who had caretaken her, except her parents, were very selfishly carrying her or caring for her just by association, not because they really wanted to care for her. Whereas Diana and Martha had cared for her completely selflessly. So that experience also of selfless care was something she needed to learn from Diana and Martha, which after she has learned, now she can bring to Mr. Rochester's life, that selfless level of caretaking. That when she was at the most destitute level, and everyone, it's not just Diana and Martha who taught her that, she learned that pieces. That's why she had such a struggling life also since her parents died. In each of the places where bits and pieces of unconditional love and care was shown to her, with each woman who showed that to her, from those women, despite her having lost her mother, she learned that deeper level of caretaking from those women who showed her the maternal kind of love, showed her the unconditional love, showed her some element of unselfishness driven love, showed her some element of mutual dependency related love, all of which was necessary for Jane to become the wife she became to Mr. Rochester. I was also necessary for both of them. Now in this life, they couldn't clear the karma with Bertha properly, but in a future life, now if a Bertha like person comes, then they may have to clear. Now they know better how to take care of a person who will be a disabled person in a better, more fairer way. Their soul will have that memory. And secondly, this is a, I'm not 100% sure whether this is also a twin flame experience possibility, where I feel, because Bertha was Mr. Understand, in twin flame journey now, this high level soulmates can also experience what Mr. Rochester and Jane have experienced in Jane Eyre. So soulmates have a different, slightly different purpose than twin flames do. So as twin flames, if Mr. Rochester and Jane are the same soul, then the same soul will also meet the same soul in another body also. So that's why when Mr. Rochester and Jane, if they are the same soul, it also can mean that Bertha and St. John are also the same soul. And St. John's character is what? St. John's character is very controlled character, very stable and stationary character, very cold and calculating character. So you see how St. John is Bertha's twin flame possibility as well, because while St. John is all cold and calculative and very coolly he makes his plans, and he's very he's manifesting the coldness related parameters of life, where he's exploring the aspects related to cold calculating steps. Whereas what was Bertha experiencing? Bertha was experiencing the steps related to fiery, passionate steps. So she is very impulse driven, whereas he is very cold calculation driven. When will they and both of them have harm associated with it. That's why only some harm is present in St. John's life, also some harm is present in Bertha's life. Bertha's life has a greater harm, and that's why in that life Bertha and St. John can never meet. But when slowly, and this is how the twin flame infinity symbol, in the infinity symbol, infinity, if you know, infinity is a number that has infinite possibilities, right? So infinity, 1 million, infinity is an unaccountable number. So this unaccountable number is related to the unaccountable number of lives also you can have as twin flames, where if both of the partners are imbalanced in some way mentally, where Bertha's imbalance was coming from her mental illnesses and the socioeconomic conditions of her life. St. John's patterns of choice was coming from not his mental illness, but he has a little bit of a social illness. He has socially not understood how to treat women in the right way. He knows some appropriate way to treat women, the financial way or responsible way to treat women, but deeply emotional ways of treating women in the right compassionate manner, he hasn't learned that. That's why he was okay with just dragging Jane with him. He just looks at people at a very functional tool aspect. He's not looking at humans at a humane aspect, that their emotions are also going to be present, and with the emotions, how emotions should impact you. And he rejected also Rosamond's offer of love. That's why only, because he is not able to reciprocate. He was also, St. John was possibly a high level either antisocial personality, but antisocial personality who knows how to do good, or high level autistic personality, or a personality who is narcissism driven, and all of these, and that also makes him Bertha was also narcissism driven in some ways. That's why only she hates that Rochester is dating someone else or wants to marry someone else, because it's your narcissism that causes you to not let go of a partner. When you can see, obviously you can't have a functional life with them if you are not narcissism driven or mentally ill. You will see that. But when you are mentally ill, narcissism driven, and some social or mental illness is going on, you will only consider another person as a object to be used. So Bertha was also using the fact that she has been married on paper as a fact that she is responsible to be with him, or she must be with him, or he can't be with anyone else just because he's married to her. These are all high toxic patterns of behavior, which even when you are not as mad as Bertha, many women do project that in their relationships with their men, or many men can do that in their relationships with women. And the opposite also happens, where cold those who are very highly fiery type personality, they will do that, and they will have that kind of Bertha like behavior in a minor level also when they are not mentally ill at that time. Whereas a person who is not socially ill like St. John, he will also like that maltreat a wife. He will not understand, because he has a social illness. He will not perceive only the difference between the journey a man has to make and a woman has to make. He will not perceive that what dangers a woman will have when a woman has to travel, whereas what dangers of women. And why did Jane did travel from Thornfield to the river's home. She took a few weeks to travel and reach there, and in that few weeks of traveling only, she had all the abject poverty related conditions in her life manifest in her life that a missionary would be subject to when a missionary is going in a foreign land. So she did have a very personal experience also for a few weeks before she landed in their home, to understand what it means to be that. And also she had that experience, the missionary life related experience, this glimpse was also given to her when she was in Lowood as well, because Lowood school related life only will exist in a less developed country settings, right? So she had 5-6 years or 8-10 years of experience at Lowood, few weeks of experience by herself when she was traveling from running away from Thornfield. So all of these have given her exact idea of what missionary life would be. So that's why only that hardship she had to take. Why? To understand that if Jane hadn't had the context of living in Lowood, or hadn't had the context of being hungry and without food, without clothes, without shelter for a few days before she reached the rivers, she would never have understood deeply what it means to be a missionary's wife. And if St. John's power over her had been really strong, she would have, got magnetized by his convictions to now go with him to become a missionary with him, and that would have led to a greater harm unfold in her life. That's why, in order not for the greater harm to unfold in her life, lesser levels of harm at Lowood, lesser severe conditions related to the 2 weeks journey she made, all of this was presented to her for her to understand deeply that life was not suitable for her, that is not the life she can take. But what was suitable for her was a life where she wanted a life of love. Being an orphan, she will want it even more than other normal people might. Rochester also was seeking love only, and there also another parallelism is there, which I might discuss in another video. It's already a 1 hour video. So understand that it is very highly likely that Bertha and St. John were also soulmate potential, or twin flames partners, or their twin flames will experience these kind of characteristics only. And if St. John wants, after seeing Jane and Rochester and their love in some other life or in this life, if a St. John like person or a Bertha like person wants to emulate the love story of Rochester and Jane, understand that Rochester and Jane's life was not all lovey-dovey, or was not all comfort filled. They had to do a lot of uncomfortable things in life, difficult challenges in life, face a lot of difficult challenges in order for them to finally have the resting place with each other. That is why they went through all these challenges, and in order for them to appreciate and value each other as their twin flame counterparts, which they wouldn't have appreciated and valued if they didn't have the challenges that they had in their life. Similarly, with St. John and Bertha, if they are twin flames, or even if they are not twin flames, if St. John's, the reason why St. John's potential twin flame will be if St. John in the future wants to become a twin flame and decides, God, why am I not being a twin flame? Why are you not setting me on a twin flame journey? I have done so many sacrifices. He could think that in this life I taught 1,000 children as a missionary. So why not, I also deserve some, I have done all these hardships in my life. But St. John was experiencing hardship at what level? At a very neutral or apathetic level. So with apathy and neutrality, you can't become a twin flame. In order to become a twin flame, you have to have balanced emotions in you, where neutrality might have a place, but apathy doesn't have a place. St. John was a very apathetic individual, or apathetic, autistic, narcissistic. These were all the combination characteristics he had. He was not greatly narcissistic, that's why he wanted to serve people, but he was minor level narcissistic. That's why he didn't understand that as soon as he leaves, Diana and Martha doesn't have a home, doesn't have a shelter. He didn't think only of all those challenges about his sisters, which Jane did think about. That's why she shared the money, so that now if St. John leaves also, Martha and Diana have a choice to leave their governess position to live in the cottage that the rivers used to stay. They could have the option of staying there now. They don't have to leave and become a governess. They can take rest in the future while they can become a governess for 10-20 years. But if they want, they now have some income present in their bank that they can use for their future after they become elderly and aged. Because what happens to elderly people, that also she understood when she was interacting with Mrs. Fairfax, and also when she went back to take care of Mrs. Reed before she died. So that also she understands what happens to the elderly, what caretaking elderly also need, or what caretaking women who are dependent on men, who are clueless about their dependency, what happens to those women. She had experienced it via multiple women. That's why only she was ready to help her sisters. So I hope this was educational and informative, and anyone wants to pose any questions, comments, I would love to hear from you. Thank you for watching this video. Have a great day.